Good day, everyone. Today, our topic is on how to measure the superstructure. There are things that you need to know before you start measuring. You need to first know where do you start with your superstructure and where do you end. So our superstructure is measured exactly from where we stopped with the foundations, that is the underside of the surface bed, up to the underside of the wall plate. And then another important factor that you need to consider is you do not measure any openings. You assume that there's no door and there's no windows. You just measure, you take as if there's the wall, as the doors and windows will be measured under adjustments. So your walls have become now 220 millimeters thick unless stated. Then you need to compile your measuring list. You will start with the DPC, is the brickwork, the finishes to brickwork, DPM, the surface bed, the finishes to a floor, ceiling, and the finishes to the ceiling. Once you've determined those, then it means you can measure now. So here is the drawing showing our structure, and then we have to measure the superstructure. So it's the size of our building is 5 meter 500 by 9,500, and then the height of our wall is 2 meter 800. And consider that we're starting from underside, right? So we have our surface bed, which is 75 millimeters thick. Then on the plan, you are given the specification that you need to go through before you start with working out. So your brickwork is in stretcher bond. Your wall is faced outside and plastered inside. You've got the granulithic floor finish. You've got the granulithic floor skirting. You've got the curved cornice. You've got the rhino board ceiling. You've got edge sections cover strip, and then 2 coats of internal PVA on ceiling and the plaster. And then you've got 15 megapascals of concrete on surface bed. So here is our worked exercise. You have to first calculate the center line, bearing in mind that our walls become now 220, not 330. So it will give you those dimensions. Add 55 plus 95 gives you 15 times 230. Subtract 808, it gives us 29, 120. Then we convert it into meters. So when you measure your DPC, you take the center line by the width of the wall and describe it. Once that has been done, you can measure your sand blinding if it is shown on the plan. So I assume that our sand blinding is 20 millimeters thick. So I first need to know the area that will be covered by the sand blinding. I took those dimensions because they were given externally to externally, so I had to subtract my walls. It gave us those dimensions. So is our breadth. So when you're booking it, the standard system says that it is measured in cubic meters, so it will be your internal dimensions as already calculated by the thickness of the blinding, which is that 20 millimeters if you divide it by 1,000, and then you describe it as a clean river sand blinding under the floors. Thereafter, you do your DPM. Also, your DPM is measured by the area that it will be covering. So in the same dimensions, it's your length times your breadth you have already calculated. So it's a matter of booking and describe. Once you have done with that, you measure your concrete floor, which is the surface bed. Surface bed is measured in cubic meters. You have already have the 2 meters, that is your length and your breadth. So now the last one will be the surface bed, that is the thickness of your concrete floor, which is 75. Remember, we are round offing to 2 decimal places. Once you are done with that, you describe, and then you measure. The next step, it will be your screed. But in this case, they say it's a granulithic finish. So the granulithic finish is just that finishing done right on top of the concrete. So that shiny stuff. But this one now, we need to measure the screed. Also, the screed is measured in square meters. Then you already have the dimensions. Once you have measured your screed, you can measure the finishing on top of the screed, even though on the specification it says the granule. So your tiles again is measured by the area it will cover. So it's the same dimensions as you've done. And thereafter, you start to do the floor finishes. Your floor finishes will be the skirting and the quadrant. So both of these finishes are measured in meters. They are linear. So you have two sides that is 5,06 and two sides that is 9,06, and then you describe it accordingly. Or you can add 5,06 by 9,06 and times it by 2. It's going to give you that's 28,24. So you can use any method that you think it will be easier for your understanding when it comes to the calculation of the floor finishes, that is your skirting and the quadrant. Then we go again, the same thing repeatedly. So you have to measure now your brickwork. Remember, with your brickwork, you always start from where you stopped with your foundation. So we added that 75 millimeter for our surface bed, and then it gave us that height. So you take the center line first for your ordinary brick, and then you multiply by that height. And thereafter, you have to measure the finishes to your wall. So the finishes to your wall, you've got internal finishes as well as the external finishes. So for your internal finishes, you will have those two dimensions by 2.08. That is the height from top of the surface bed now to underside of the wall plate. And thereafter, the same area that is in your wall, it will be the same area that will be painted. Your paint will be applied on those walls. So there's no need for you to rebook this because it's going to be the same dimensions. But if you can rebook it, it's still fine. Or if the examiner is asking you separately, then you're still gonna be fine. Thereafter, once you are done with the internal finishes, you will have to do the external finishes. Now your external finishes is the total external perimeter of the structure. So you add all your four sides there, it's going to give you that 30,000, even though when you're calculating the center line, you've already shown it. So you can do in two ways. You can take two sides by the height, that is your length, and your breadth, same thing, or you take the total external perimeter, it's going to give you the same thing. Once you are done with your external finish, thereafter you measure your ceiling. Your ceiling is gonna be covering the same area as your floors, so it's a matter of you booking. There's no extra calculations there. Also, don't forget to include your paint when you're measuring. Then you add, prepare and apply whatever cost they give you in the specification on top of your ceiling. Okay, then the next thing you measure is the cornice. Your cornice is measured in meters. So you take the whole total interior of your structure and then you describe it. So on top of your cornice, that's you will prepare and apply paint in the same area. Then that is all you have to measure in superstructure. Thank you so much.